So much for joining us today on our monthly webinar for OnBoard. We're so excited to share with you this month about meeting preparation and follow-up with OnBoard. So I'm looking forward to sharing some tips with you about how you can help the actual meeting go smoother, more strategic, getting more out of it in taking certain steps before the meeting and after the meeting. We will be sharing some of these tips, both from the admin perspective and the CEO perspective. And on that note, this is also available as a recording to you after, so you will be able to access this information after. But thank you so much for joining. And I want to also point out that I'm here with Gabe Smith, who is co-hosting with me. Gabe and I both are customer success managers on our team, and we look forward to sharing.
Hi, everyone. So, as Emily just noted, I again work on this wonderful customer success team. And we also have a third member of the team also joining us. While not noted there by picture and name, our good friend Jillian Walker is also helping us with kind of admin duties. She'll be taking all your questions. So do feel free to submit those as we go through the webinar today in the chat, and she'll be happy to help out with that. Hi, Jillian. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Excited to be here.
Just to put a voice with a name there. And as Emily noted, just as a reference point, a lot of the content that we will be discussing today is coming from How the Best Board of Directors Works, the definitive guide to better board meetings. And this is a great piece then that was put together that is available on the Passageways website. And so Jillian will also be sending kind of a copy of that URL link in the chat there. So if you do want to take a look at that at your own time, there's some great little kind of surveys, some other things I think that can provide some additional material here to what Emily and I will be speaking about today. Then do feel free to check that out.
Great, thanks, Gabe. So really, why is this topic important? Really, as your board portal software, our goal for you, it's not simply just to reduce paper. It's not simply just to involve technology more in your meetings, but we do see the value that, of course, in all of your meetings, you are having people sacrifice their time, open up their schedule to be together. And a lot of these are people that can really contribute and add to the bottom line of your meeting. So what our goal is to really leverage your time with these valuable people and your valuable time that you have all together, so that your board meeting is forward-looking, centered around strategy. Our goal is for it not to center around administration, talking about past business, that kind of thing. As I say that, I do realize a number of you use this for your board, as well as other types of committees, other types of leadership teams. So I realize that there are different types of meetings that are using this as well, but we want to really be a tool so that you can maximize your time and do what is most valuable for you during your meeting.
And I think just to add to that, this is certainly not an exercise to do any kind of shaming or whatsoever of practices in there. I think we're all going to find that there's elements that we can always kind of improve on. And I think the key here is just to ensure that, a varied way of how people run meetings, that, there are some established best practices that we can all kind of work towards. So we're certainly, looking forward to and encourage people to provide feedback, good honest feedback as to what they do or don't do. Again, what we're setting out here is kind of, based on a lot of organizations and what they find to run effective meetings with. So like I said, just make sure there's no spotlight on anyone here today, and focusing on that. Like I said, hopefully each one can kind of get a good tidbit out of here that you can maybe take back to your board or in your own kind of administrative facilities there, in terms of how you are running the meetings, that will, again, ensure for a more improved meeting.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Well, let's move to our first tip. We're going to have a couple of tips for before the meeting and then a couple of tips after the meeting. Like Gabe said, the resource that we're pointing you all towards, there are many more where this comes from. So we know there's a lot of tips, and if you even are able to implement one or two, then we hope you find that value for your purposes. So first of all, talking about before the meeting. One thing that's very crucial and helpful, also can be a pain point to coordinate this, we realize, is that the board materials really should be distributed a week before the meeting. Why is this important? Well, it is essential that directors do have enough time to read the materials. That way, if any questions come up before the meeting, that they can be addressed. Anything from a resource or some numbers that might look contradictory, or something that looks missing, or a clarifying question. That way, is not clarifying, that is not taken up during the meeting. Also, obviously, so the directors can have enough time to familiarize themselves with the content, so that the discussion can be forward facing. Another point along these lines is that this can be an opportunity for you to do any relevant approvals before the meeting and not take up the meeting time. If that is, Gabe will talk about this even more, but if that's something that you have not done yet, it actually is pretty easy to set up to do outside of your meeting through the portal, and we'd be happy, your customer success manager, we'd be happy to walk you through more in detail about how that can work for you. But there are occasions when there's a need, if you are putting your materials up a week before the meeting, we realize that there's an occasion when there might need to be a last minute change. You might know that something is not available until about a day or two before, while maybe 90% of everything else is available. That is kind of the beauty of OnBoard. You can go ahead and publish your book and the agenda, and then any last minute changes or additions can be made without withholding the rest of the material for anyone else. It also provides value in the sense that everything is instantly available. So should you need a last minute change or addition, you aren't dealing with version control and everybody having different versions. But because of this, we would again encourage you, for everything that you do have available, try it as much as you can the week before and go ahead and publish it. And then you can make those changes that are needed after, when that's the case.
Yeah, so again, just kind of tying things back throughout the presentation here to how those things can apply to OnBoard. And we specifically wanted to make sure that we're noting in a couple different ways where that can be of value to you, no matter what kind of package that you have as well, since we know that obviously everyone that is attending may have a different package with each other. There's definitely resources available no matter what services you have there that are going to apply here. So we'll certainly do our best to point those out as we go through the presentation. But as Emily noted, there's a couple key parts there in the kind of the before the meeting and how that can kind of tie back to OnBoard. So one of the first things that she noted, I think is a real good point. And I think it's tough because I imagine all of you are perfectionists when it comes to this, to where you don't want the whole board book or the agenda to really be available until it's been seen by 25 different people, that you have full faith that it is the exact version that you want, that's going to be the final version, and now you're ready to go. But unfortunately, as a consequence of that, that may mean then that you're posting it just a day before the actual board meeting, or maybe just a couple days, and certainly that won't lead to a lot of time then for board members to be able to review everything. So I think part of it is to maybe kind of put that aside, and knowing that, look, in this, no matter how well you plan out, there seems to always be last minute changes. So no matter how well everything is planned leading up to it, you're probably going to have to make some kind of last minute changes. So just knowing that and accepting that ahead of time, and realizing that the bulk majority of the content that you have for that particular meeting should go up when you have it available. And even if you're missing one particular report, or you have one particular kind of section then that's still a little bit hazy, make note of that. Make sure that everyone's kind of aware, but certainly do not then hold off everything else before posting. So that again, with OnBoard, in terms of being able to do things like meeting visibility, being able to kind of take the meeting back down if you do need to make a change, all changes being instant, that all goes towards that idea. And then having either the instant notifications, or you may even say, no, OnBoard, I don't want you to alert everyone that change has been made, because I actually want to email out specifically where those changes were made, provide some additional context. That's great. You can do that as well. So you have a little bit of either or there in terms of how you want to deliver those changes that may have been made. Again, that at least prevents from kind of holding up the full agenda or board book from being published, just because, again, maybe a report is still in progress. The other thing I think is sometimes the burden of creating the agenda or board book tends to fall on maybe just one pair of shoulders. Do know that beyond the idea of being able to set an administrator for that particular meeting, you can also ensure that there are individuals who need to contribute content to that are designated as a contributor permission type. I know a lot of organizations even have multiple contributors for either a particular section of the book or for the book as a whole. And so that just allows for them to be able to get in, be able to add the content that they need to, but not have full admin privileges then that, for example, the admin of the meeting would, to be able to set permission settings or some of the other things that come along with that admin privilege. But by having then multiple contributors in there, they can be able to start then adding content to it once the agenda becomes visible there. So that way, again, you're not having the full burden of all the work kind of placed on one's shoulders. So those are a couple things to start off with. Some little tips then as we kind of bring it back to onboard, but we'll have some more here coming for you shortly.
Great. So just wanted to take a moment here just to kind of check in if for those that are willing and daring enough to participate, we have a poll for you. And we're just curious for any people, again, this is not to shame anybody, but because we realize that you're juggling a lot of moving parts to make these meetings happen. But for anyone, go ahead, and we're having a question here about when your board materials are distributed before the meeting. So are your board materials distributed a week before the meeting? Go ahead and answer yes or no. I'm really proud of our participants. I'm seeing a strong yes, a little bit more than I was even expecting. So way to go, and high fives for everybody.
And some good, honest answers as well.
Yeah,
too. And
exactly.
I think, I think it's always one thing to, again, note that not every meeting is going to be the perfect meeting in that sense. So again, what may be kind of the law of averages, most meetings of the year we're able to post ahead of time, but there's always kind of that one crazy situation. That's obviously, fully understandable in that respect. We also have I think a great comment from Brandy as well that noted just in regards to the last section about kind of the best way of preparing a book, and maybe noting that maybe a particular report isn't available, but they have a not yet available actually specifically noted either on a section or where there might be then information still to come, while still knowing they're going to post the rest of the book or the rest of the content they have. So I think it's a great idea. Again, I know that the report kind of notes like a blank area for there. That might be confusing to some. They might think that that something's not loading properly. So I think some actual text saying that not yet available, is a good way of doing that. So
great point. Yep. Okay, good. Well, we'll go ahead and move on. From that survey, thank you everybody for participating. I see that your number is a little stronger than our survey response on this slide. So we're going to keep on going. Tip number 2 before the meeting is that the CEO will contact each board member prior to the board meeting to confirm that all the information that is needed is there and to answer any questions. So it's been a long common practice for the CEO to check with the board chair or lead director shortly before the meeting. And we would encourage you, any CEOs are on the call or any admins that want to encourage the CEO on the call, or the CEO that you're working with, to take this even a step further and to contact actually everyone that's going to be participating in the meeting. This is an excellent way to ensure that everyone has what they need and that the meeting runs smoothly. This is also a great way, we are aware that even if you're publishing your book, let's say ideally you have your book set a week before the meeting, we also realize everyone attending your meeting has busy lives, and it could slip through some people's schedule that they're not actually looking at everything. So this can be a great way to check in with everyone and ask, do you have any questions? Have you actually read the book? So this can be an important step to make sure everybody is prepared for the meeting in advance. I do realize that it can feel challenging. I don't have the time. that feels really hard to contact everyone before the meeting. At the same time, if people don't have the materials that are needed, or if they're not actually doing the preparation work of reading the book in advance, then you really are paying for that in time anyway, in the sense that the meeting is not going to be able to be effectively being able to talk about what the contents of the board book are if people are not actually reading it, or if there's some sort of feedback that something's not there or something needs to be refocused, then of course that will eat up more time. So we do encourage you. It is an investment of time, but at the same time, you probably will pay later if something is off or if people are not reading anyway. So Gabe is going to share again about how to move this forward in OnBoard.
Yeah, and so I think this was a great kind of informative aspect of the article to me, in respects to kind of having, that contact ahead of time. I always kind of thought of, with the meetings, that all of a sudden meetings taking place, and that's really kind of the first instance of, either the board chair or CEO, having communication here, leading up to it. So could really, potentially meet some serious questions, ahead of time, or get some valued feedback that can already then factor into how that meeting is going to run. And so, again, tying this back into OnBoard, there's a couple things, no matter what kind of particular package you have, that would be able to kind of facilitate that. So for the, the OnBoard Core and kind of the our Legacy Essentials package, this would be then conversation the CEO would want to have then one-on-one. I would need to have then, kind of a little bit more out of OnBoard in respects of either direct calls or emails to get that kind of, feedback or one-on-one conversations with different board members then leading up to the meeting. With our then OnBoard collaboration and Legacy Enterprise package, one of the new additions or new features that came in from late last year's then product releases was OnBoard Messenger. And so this can be then a great tool, whether you're using it then in terms of one-on-one communication. So again, in this particular instance, maybe a CEO is just speaking to one particular board member, or if it's for the full board of directors there, could have then the full group, to where a back and forth kind of conversation that stays within OnBoard. So you have all the security there, and encryption, everything that OnBoard offers, and have it all in one place. So if then maybe the night before that meeting, again, someone wants to kind of go back to that messenger conversation. Oh, what was that one point that Jane brought up, or what was the one comment there that John said that he wanted to have a little look into. I can go right back into that, as opposed to going through tons and tons of maybe email threads back and forth that might be scattered throughout my personal and work email, and all over the place. So the messenger can be a really great tool for those kind of conversations there ahead of time. And then when we get into some of the nature of how, Emily was kind of noting that, a lot of these things can be kind of very survey-like in terms of the questions. And so there's also a great feature within OnBoard then for those with our governance package or Legacy Professional and Enterprise, to where you have the ability of surveys, creating surveys from the actions section. So these surveys then can be multiple questions. They can be any type of question, whether it's single select or multi-select, or kind of an open note that you want, kind of a short essay almost type answers. So the type of questions can be limitless in how you ask those. We just had, a couple examples like, do you have everything you need? Are there any questions ahead of time? Have you read the book? Those kind of items that can be put on a survey and sent out then leading up to a meeting, just so that way, again, any kind of key feedback right before that meeting is going right to then the important people at that point. So, we also realize, kind of taking a step back, that, again, probably a lot of the audience here, are then administrators who are, again, kind of setting up the agendas, setting up the board book. I'm sure you're probably sitting there and going, Gabe, no matter if we put it 2 or 3 weeks in advance, we're still going to have those couple board members that maybe just won't open the book ahead of time, right? This is obviously kind of a task to where the kind of struggles that I think what we note about and some of the best practices, again, stretches across the entire organization and kind of the entire apparatus, from the admin side to board members to the board chair. So this is a great addition as well. It's another new kind of release then towards the end of last year that is then available to, again, our legacy enterprise, as well as organizations that have the global suite package. And that's our new onboard meeting analytics. And the intent here is not to be Big Brother and to start, again, I'm using this word shame quite a bit during this, so I apologize in terms of it. But it's not to shame any board members of saying, hey, you haven't opened up the board book yet or the meeting, because really all of this is kind of high level data. It's not getting into per user settings. But as you see from the meeting views on that left-hand side there, that graph is to kind of help show, in the lead up to the meeting date, how many views do you have of the book? And so that's going to be a great indicator just how much preparation, is the board doing, prior to that board meeting. And obviously you'll be able to get a little bit of an idea from that to maybe send some gentle reminders, leading up to the meeting then the next time around. You also then have what I think are some great ways of really being able to steer the conversation of the meeting and being able to dictate then what some of the more important items might be. Is you can actually look into the book here in terms of the different sections and what's getting the most views, as well as what sections are also getting the most annotations. And so you may see, oh, this, one section, the section 5 of our board book here has a lot of views and has a lot of annotations taken. That might be a section that we might be needing to spend a bit more time on than maybe we initially planned for. And so now you can make those preparations ahead of time and just making sure, to have a more efficient meeting the day of. Or that could also, in having this material then ahead of time, could also play into the kind of survey questions that you ask. So, or the questions that the CEO has on a one-on-one basis, seeing that, again, a certain area is really becoming popular. Why is it so popular? Let's get some feedback there. So again, we kind of know what we're going to be getting when we go into the meeting. So definitely, if that's an area that you haven't checked out as of yet, and you have one of those packages, definitely take a look at it and see, meeting to meeting, because you'll certainly want to get a chance to expose that over several meetings to really get a trend analysis on that. So.
Yeah, that's great. And Gabe, I actually did hear one organization when they looked at this after it rolled out, they said, looking at our data, again, it's not to shame anyone, but they called it a quote unquote game changer, because they saw that, maybe only 2 of their board members were actually accessing the board book in advance. And again, it's not to shame anyone, but if that is actually happening, a step towards moving to more productive meetings would be, some of these checking in advance. Did you get the book? Did you read the book?
Yeah.
Some more just checking in, accountability at the beginning. And so that, knowledge is power, and knowing if people are not actually accessing your book in advance, it just helps you to make informed decisions about how you can have more effective meetings.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to check in here, just our main goal, that your meetings are at least 80% forward-looking, centered around strategy. Anyone that is willing, please go ahead and we have a poll question. We're going to ask you what percentage you feel like your board meeting and agenda discussions are. Again, we would say a goal would be at least 80% that they're forward-looking and centered around strategy. We realize that might look different, but we're going to give you a chance to respond to what you would say your meeting is.
And I will say, we'll kind of the elephant in the room here too, with these the kind of results that we have on screen. You'll notice that in each one there's kind of this room for improvement as well, which is kind of, I think is obviously is going to be in the same kind of category as no. But again, I think just without maybe necessarily being as hurt by it, maybe you're interested there. So,
exactly.
We're obviously just doing a yes, no in this scenario. But again, I think that we can probably all put ourselves sometimes in the kind of room for improvement, category towards that. But yeah, like I said, just wanted to make sure and call that out so we know that some of the graphs that are being used, there was a kind of a cop-out answer, I would say, on some of the polls for others. So I'm sorry that we're not allowing that for this time around. But again, we appreciate the feedback. We're all in a safe space here with this.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I mean, not surprisingly, it does look like a majority of people are not hitting the 80% goal. But that's what these tips are here for. And I just want to champion. It looks like we have a number of people that over 80% of their goals are that. So that's really great to hear that is how some meetings are happening as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and we will continue. We're going to start talking now about after the meeting. So what are some ways, what are some habits you can form after the meeting that are going to help you have more effective meetings? So first of all, we want to encourage you to get feedback from the board, looking for information along the lines of, did we accomplish what needed to get done? What could have done better? What could we have done better? Were the right materials available in advance? And what items should be on the next agenda? So there's really kind of two categories of information that you can be getting from this type of feedback. First of all, any unfinished business that was not able to happen in this meeting, kind of addressing how do we want to address this? Do we just want to put it on the next board meeting's agenda? Is this something that needs to be decided before then? Do we want to name a certain committee that needs to take action on this before our next board meeting? Do we need to set a special meeting in order to address this? How do we want to handle any unfinished business? The second type of helpful feedback is just how to improve the meeting flow for the next time. So, there can be some great feedback from your participants. What could we have done better? Were the right materials available in advance? If not, what would have been helpful? Should this information be distributed at the next meeting? Maybe in the portal under resources, which Gabe will talk about. Are there some key items that should be included in the next meeting's agenda? This basically just serves as a conversation starting point for looking forward to the next meeting. So you can always evaluate the appropriate actions from this. I kind of covered a lot of this, but if a matter can't wait, do you need to have a special meeting in between? And I'm going to pass it over to Gabe next about how you can handle this within the portal.
Yeah, so, this is just kind of a recap of, again, a lot of the same items, whether it be, kind of surveys or messenger related with the items. So I did want to clarify a couple different things, just because we're getting some great feedback, from the chat in terms of how people use different sections, so or different services. So, a couple things on Messenger. One thing I do want to point out as a best practice, and just to kind of keep in mind, especially for those who, again, may have that service but haven't utilized it as much thus far, is do know that, the threads then that are created cannot be deleted. So you want to make sure that, just as a general best practice, that, again, if you're going to create kind of a thread then for a pre-meeting, one, I would maybe kind of name it in such a way to where you kind of know what the specific purpose is. So then when it's kind of past that moment, people aren't continuing to go back into that thread and kind of make what was intended for just a lead up to, for example, February's board meeting, that people are still then adding content to that then, or adding messages to that in July when there's a July meeting thread. So, and then also to choose wisely when you're obviously including the people that are supposed to belong to that messenger group. That's kind of key there. The other thing that I'll note is now we do fully realize that, again, we're very proud and excited by the fact that we get to work with so many different organizations across so many different industries. Now, with that, though, comes that what can work for some may not work for others. And so there was a great point that was it Lisa? Or is Ilsa made then, which is, she works with an organization that has to deal with open meeting laws. And so things then to where like a private message group, isn't as accommodating. And so they had to disable, Messenger, at that point. So, and that's something to that point, I want to encourage you, you have an advocate with your customer success manager that really can help, create tailored strategies. So if there's something that you kind of pull from this, like I love the concept of this, but maybe because, like what Ilse had noted, maybe because there's a restriction in open meeting laws that they can't use the messenger tool, maybe again, strategizing with your CSM about still finding a way to produce that same kind of result, but maybe through a different medium in that respect. So I would definitely encourage, any of those kind of items from that sense, just to think about that. when you're kind of going about any of the tips that we're going through here for today.
Great. So our next tip for after the meeting is pretty straightforward. And this just the CEO basically connecting, keeping everyone informed in between meetings. So this can look like a in-between meeting report to the board. And basically in this, there's different ways of keeping directors informed. You can talk about strategic initiatives, successes that are happening in between meetings, challenges that you're coming up against, any materials that are appropriate for the board to see in between meetings. So Gabe's going to share about how you can do that.
So I thought this was another kind of great one that kind of jumped out at me, when looking through this particular resource and a couple others that we're reviewing, which is kind of, what are some of the interactions that take place, from one meeting to the next, and how that can be kind of improved and streamlined. And so, the idea of kind of a CEO report or something of, here are some of the action items that kind of came out of that meeting. Here's how we're going to go ahead and address those. I think that is something that, I'm not sure if a lot of organizations do that, but I think that could be, again, a great kind of value add. And so looking at how we can kind of facilitate that through OnBoard, this is something that everyone has access to. And again, in my experiences working, as a customer success manager and working with a lot of the organizations that I have, I would say probably announcements may not be an area of the OnBoard portal that I see a lot of organizations utilize. Maybe just kind of like a little kind of quick kind of, oh, here's something up and coming. Maybe it's just a corporate event or something of that nature, which is great. Just another way, because the calendar is really kind of ideal for the meetings themselves, but maybe announcements of something else beyond the meeting. But keep in mind that that section there, one of the best things about it is it's right there kind of on the homepage that you have, in the OnBoard portal. So it's always going to be something that the board or anybody else that has access to your OnBoard portal that you want to have access to that will kind of see when they first come in. And announcements also have the ability, you can set permission settings just like you would a meeting. So if, for example, the CEO then kind of builds a report on some of the action items that came from the previous meeting, instead of just emailing that out, you could actually then post that as an announcement and make sure then to set that particular announcement with the permission settings of the same then group that had access to that board meeting. So there isn't some kind of conflict here to where someone then has access to your OnBoard portal. Maybe they're supposed to attend a certain committee meeting or have access to that kind of information, but shouldn't have access to the CEO report. Again, you could prevent them from being able to see that as an announcement on the homepage. So that is I think, is again another great area that you can kind of further explore. Other things then we kind of noted about surveys. Another great helpful tool within here is also then voting as part of the approval apparatus. So this again is with your OnBoard governance or legacy professional enterprise packages. But this would allow for you to do any kind of votes that might need to be taking place then post-meeting. So approval of the minutes, for example, have that done in between the meetings, and that might not then necessitate then any taking of the time then for the next meeting. Or if people need to sign off on something, while it's not noted here, another then action that's also available within those same packages is also e-signatures. So you can also have then, if the actual minutes then needs to be signed by the board chair, then following it, you can have that sent to the board chair then to do an electronic signature. Or, if it becomes in terms of kind of using these reports and posting, you might also have your own internal intranet that you might want to post this to. And then for our organizations that have then Ensemble, Passageways then intranet product, that would be another great use then of being able to kind of use both OnBoard for board meetings and then, announcements of information like that through your Ensemble site. And again, another little key tip with the announcement section is you can also refer to it if you wanted to post that report in the resources section. You could also include the link of that on the announcement. So the resource section also available to everyone who has OnBoard. Great repository for files, whether it be things that you want to call upon before a meeting takes place, and you might note that then within the agenda or the board book, or if it's something that might be involved in kind of a post-meeting survey or report. Again, another kind of great place for that people can access, and you do have unlimited space with there, so there won't be any issues then of that file being too large, for example. So again, some other kind of little tips then to keep in mind as you look at your onboard portal.
Great. Okay, so just our last tip here, not be surprising, is planning for your next meeting. Right after your meeting is a great time to plan for your next meeting. So during the board meeting, a lot of times the corporate secretary or others are jotting down notes that might include items that you want to see on the next agenda or other follow-up actions. Depending on your specific needs, some companies have found success when the executive management team hold a scheduled debrief meeting the day after, for example. They might go through just a debrief and send some agenda notes to the corporate secretary, just looking at the next agenda. So it's a great time to do that. There are typically, in setting the agenda for the meeting, you're typically putting together both the annualized calendar, which would contain your board's reoccurring actions and agenda items that are generally scheduled to take place at a predetermined time during that year. And then also your agenda of basically what you're picking up from the last meeting, what things are coming up that needs to happen. So Jillian has put up a survey again. We'd love to hear from you whenever you start preparation for your upcoming board meeting. And it looks like we have a lot of people that are actually directly beginning the preparation after the previous board meeting here, which is great.
So another thing just to kind of I guess kind of point out here, we're getting some good feedback from you all as well in regards to I would love if Onboard Messenger can do this, or if the meeting analytics had this kind of information. So I think keep that kind of information coming. I would say beyond this webinar, again, that's another great outlet as well in terms of conversations with your customer success manager. We love hearing this stuff because then we're going and talking right to our products team as well about these items. And it's key for those two services in particular that I mentioned, because they really are kind of the phase one of both respective services. So Messenger and meeting analytics will definitely be evolving more throughout the course of this year. And so, little tips and things that can make your lives a lot easier on a day-to-day basis. We want to know that. We want to make sure that gets to our product team, so then that way, when they are then, as they are currently in terms of, really then, envisioning what phase two is going to look like in those couple services, that we do have those kind of feedback points then, right at the forefront. So, thank you so much for providing some of that, and certainly continue to encourage it, whether it's through this particular webinar or again, having one-on-one conversations with your customer success manager.
Yep, and then just one other additional tip for those of you who might not know, there is a copy function available for every meeting. You can either do it in any of your upcoming meetings you have or any past meetings. You can see kind of in the bottom right-hand corner, there's that drop-down menu that says copy. That's copying over basically the invitees as well as the permissions for the meeting. It's also copying over the agenda, just not the contents, not the files. So this can be a way you don't have to reinvent the wheel of your meeting every single time. You can also, sometimes when people will customize, of course, you might have tweaks to every individual meeting. So one way you can kind of administrate that is have a core meeting that is just the basics of what you do, the basic agenda, basic invitees, what you're doing. Set that for the end of the year, so that's not going to disappear. You can just, do it as a meeting template, for example, and then just copy that exact same meeting every single time and tweak it as needed. That can be a time saver.
Yeah, I think it's a great piece of advice, especially because I know a lot of individuals always go, well, I just hate having to set permissions each time. So I know that can certainly be one of the more kind of complex tasks that you might have, just making sure, I really hope I didn't leave this particular person off. Again, you can have it to where that kind of placeholder is there. And again, once you copy it, it'll keep those same permissions. So that's definitely a great tip there from Emily, and something that if you haven't tried before, Again, maybe this could be a little bit of testing that you do, prior to the next meeting, just putting that out. Maybe you might have a couple other people on staff that have access to OnBoard to where you can make sure that they can be able to see everything that needs to be done, but just run a couple tests. You won't be able to break anything in that respect, but it'll probably give you a lot of peace of mind going to the next meeting that everyone has access to it that should.
That's great. Well, I know we've covered a lot of tips here today, and so we wanted to give a little bit of time from you all just to hear any questions that come to mind as we've covered some best practices for before and after. Great, we'll just give it a moment here to see if anybody wants to, basically there's a chat function, if you haven't noticed, in the webinar box. And so if anybody has any questions, I know that it might take a moment to think of that or type that out. So we'll just give it a moment here.
Yeah, we'll give it a moment. And I know we've had a lot of great feedback kind of through the course of this. And I know we've kind of addressed a couple things just kind of through the point of conversation with it. And like I said, if we don't have anything at this present moment, again, fully encourage. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but we just all love talking with you. So do encourage those conversations with your customer success manager. Again, a lot of that is kind of knowing how your organization operates. What kind of goals, objectives, outcomes that you're looking to achieve, and so those kind of conversations help us in being able to help you all and making sure that again everything is running efficiently and that you are having those effective meetings. But Jillian, do we have any questions that we want to touch on here, or do we should?
Well, some of them. So we have gotten a lot of this has been a game changer, which is always really fun to see. I have answered some, really easy difference between, visible and published and all visible and agenda. So nothing specific on this webinar, but a lot of answers have come in, or a lot of questions have come in that we've answered on the side. I hope you can check some of those. Right now, let's see. So some are coming in chat and some are coming in open. Someone did ask about an update for the Office Connect function. At this time, I do not have an update for you, but we can easily, and I believe that's Deborah. I'm going to have your CSM go ahead and reach out, and we'll find out whatever you need, so we can get in with that. Another one, Tammy says, will any board member annotations be lost if there are changes made to documents within a book once published?
So that's a great question there, Tammy. So let's kind of pull that back again. So what Tammy is asking in regards to, let's say book has been published, a board member starts going in, making annotations, and then let's say an edit has been made maybe to that specific section then and reposted. Will that affect the annotations? And it would likely in that case affect it, not knowing specific instances like, are you just changing a typo versus adding in now like a whole entire new section of material that might, alter the results there. But I think that's a great point there that Tammy notes. And I want to make sure and clarify some of the items that I was kind of talking about before in regards to kind of, not to necessarily hold off the whole book for maybe the adding of a report or the adding of maybe this last little detail in a particular section. It is certainly to where you certainly want to have, if it's kind of like a 90% type thing of it, I think that's when you kind of feel pretty comfortable with publishing there, and it's not going to disrupt then the users themselves when they are starting to take annotations, at that point in time. But certainly if you do have kind of a section within question there, it may not be in your best interest then to kind of publish it incomplete, because if someone did start going in there and making annotations to that, it will be affected then if all of a sudden you kind of overhauled that section. So that might go back to, and I apologize, I'm forgetting the person's name, but that kind of noted, if there's a report, a specific report, or maybe a specific section that still needs to be updated, they may just leave it out entirely and just kind of note, still being worked on or needing to update, so that it's not kind of an incomplete version there. But that's a great question there and a great clarification to make there. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and another way as an administrator you can coordinate this is if you feel a certain section is in that 10% that might be changed, you can certainly put in the title or the description that it is a placeholder at that time without the file. If it serves your purpose, you can also put the person's name that is going to be contributing that file. That kind of provides some ownership if they are a contributor. And something you can consider is you can actually, if you are one of the administrators who has multiple people contributing to your meetings, you can go ahead and list everyone as a contributor. And that sense, people are empowered then to upload files whenever that's relevant. And again, you can feel free to just create the agenda section as a placeholder without the file if you feel like it might be changed. All right, and one of it, just as a reminder, that we talked about at the beginning, the resource that we posted a connection to, it's called the Definitive Guide to Better Board Meetings. So especially those of you that have been helped by this content, really there are so many more tips where this came from. That PDF is going to have everything from tips about meeting preparation to during the meeting to after the meeting. You know, we didn't have time to cover them all at all. Not even half of them, honestly. So there's a lot more tips there. There's also kind of a survey you can fill out to kind of get a litmus test in what your organization might be strong in these, and then some areas that you can focus on in order to improve your meeting experience. So are there any other questions at all that we want to answer at this point?
Yeah. There's lots of specific questions that we're going to have a few CSMs reach out just to make sure that we're addressing some kind of personal or some specific issues. Let's see. Someone did ask about, let me find it because we've lots of questions. When using announcements, is there a way to move your announcements in date order? It does not look like you can move the announcements once you input.
Yeah, I don't think there is a date sort for that. And again, we can probably follow up directly with kind of, again, depending on what kind of announcements you're having and what kind of order you want to set, there may be a good way of doing that in terms of how you want to set that. So Jillian will make note specifically of who is particularly asking that question, and we'll make sure to have kind of, again, customer success manager follow up directly just to identify maybe some strategies there for your specific instance in that case. And again, if there are some things then that would be helpful for you from that standpoint, again, those kind of items are great for us to know, again, so we can be able to get that as product suggestions. Because again, if it's not noted to our products team, then they're not thinking it's a priority on the next release in that sense. So again, always encourage to let us know these kind of items. Probably could always start off with can OnBoard do this? And then depending on that answer, the next follow-up should always go, well, that would help me in so many, in X, Y, and Z use cases. And again, that we'll get that right over to our products team then to start then evaluate. So.
Yeah, and also just what comes to mind for those of you that are new to announcements, just want to point out that those are also permission-based. So I know some of you have your board members that are using OnBoard, and you might have like a leadership team viewing it as well. So if you have specific board meeting follow-ups that you're putting in as an announcement, just so you know that is permission-based as well, you can just show it to the board. So, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone so much for your questions. At this point, we do want to point out that our next webinar, so we are very excited that we have recently released public posting. So some of you, this is also, we know some of you have even requested this, if this would be really helpful. You need to have your meetings available to the public. So we are really excited to show you public posting that we just released. It means you can basically share a link to your meeting publicly, wherever you would want to do that on your website or wherever that needs to go, so that people can click that link and view your meeting. So we're really looking forward to showing you the ins and outs of that. Jenny Washington and Dean Floyd are other customer success managers. Well, customer success manager and implementation manager. They're going to walk you through that. Feel free to sign up. As always, if you're not able to make that exact date and time, even if you sign up, it's going to email you a link after. You can watch it on your own time.
Hey guys, and the most important question I think we got is about that PDF that was referenced for this whole webinar. So that is in chat. Everyone should have access to that link. Please let us know if you don't get it in time by this webinar turning off, and we will get that out to you as well.
Great. Well, we just thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy days. We know that you're all busy, so hopefully this was worth your time and saving you time and making your job easier and more efficient in the long run. As Gabe pointed out, please reach out to your customer success manager. Let us know your specific instances and how we can help customize your approach to onboard according to your needs and what you would feel served by.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate you all joining us today. We'll probably just put it on mute and kind of leave the webinar open for a couple minutes, just for people to be able to pull up the URL link before we kind of close it down, as well as just us to do a little housekeeping to make sure that we're getting responses out to everyone, and then those that were unable to respond to directly through the webinar chat. That again, your customer success manager is alerted to either your inquiry or your kind of comment there, and again can follow up and do discourse. So again, thanks so much for everyone attending. Hope it was a beneficial session for you today. We love hosting these for you all, and hope you have a great rest of the week.
That's right.